Okay, welcome everybody back on stage to our discussion panel, which should be somewhere here on one of the three screens. Already yesterday at 11, we had one discussion panel where we were trying to understand what sim racing is about. Like, what is the status quo of sim racing? We are professionalizing, and there's obviously some development. So there's industries coming into with some interest, forcing into our sport, and that's a challenge definitely. And today, in the second part of the discussion panel, we want to find out how we can maybe find a way to do that. So the question for this discussion panel is how to shape the future of sim racing. And on stage, I have four wonderful guests, which I will introduce later to you. But first, I will try to sum up what we agreed on yesterday or what we had on stage. So first of all, Slide ein weiter, scheint nicht zu gehen. First of all, we found out that there is different actors which are players on the market of sim racing. And that is, first of all the hardware developers. I mean, I'm pretty sure yesterday you had some time to go around and see what's happening there, and there's a high-tech industry coming. There's expensive simulators. If you just have a look at the preparations for the GT500 race, you see some really, really cool stuff. And all the hardware is quickly developing, and there is definitely, or that is definitely one of the key actors in sim racing. And then furthermore, of course, we have the software developers. There's all the different softwares which we are playing or simulating on, which is like Project Cars we have here at the Expo, or iRacing, or Assetto Corsa. And of course, there's more which I reference to software, which is TeamSpeak, or which is Discord, like chat programs which we are using to communicate during the races. And of course, you could also argue that Windows, or like all the systems we are running, are also counting to that. And then furthermore, we have all the manufacturers. So obviously there is racing teams, there is car manufacturers who are pushing into the game. Let's say the McLaren World's Fastest Gamer thing, or Mercedes officially coming to the ESL. And that is a third actor we agreed on. And then furthermore, we have all the organizers. So we could count the ADIC in the person of Mark Henrici as one of the organizers, for example, of this GT500 race. At least we have all the private organization companies which are working on that, and that is definitely a third player. And all of them four are somehow related to sponsorships or to developing what we call sim racing. And then also yesterday, we argued that we should differentiate between these to the sim racing related players and to the sim racing non-related players. For example, for the hardware developers, somebody who's producing a keyboard is, I could count him as non-related to sim racing because he would do it anyway. And somebody who's producing a steering wheel is pretty much related to sim racing. And then if we go on the next slide, we can see that if we come to the question of sponsorship, why is it interesting to sponsor in sim racing? That would be because it could be a part of a strategic franchise program of a company, so they would like to introduce all this. And they try to carry their brand across the globe. That's pretty much the same like in real sports, I would say. But lately, and that was also coming into play yesterday when we were also discussing about the relation of sim racing to real motorsport, we have something which is maybe not benefit-orientated, but we could save money or save work. For example, I can outsource parts of motorsport, like the testing. I don't have to rent a track. I don't have to see how I get all the insurance and cars there and fuel and all my stuff. So I can outsource that to my living room or to somewhere else. And also, I can test new rules. So before I, for example, or think of a DRS zone or something, I could test it in sim racing and see how the race goes. So that is definitely what we learned yesterday to the relation of motorsport. And then on the next slide, and that is one of the last things I want to say before we come to the actual discussion, we have kind of a controversy. So what we see here, all the teams, the preparation, the competitive level of sport, that is highly professional. That is really, really great racing. And all the hard and software, you can convince yourself, is pretty much developed. So that is really cool. But behind that, we have almost no structure. So sim racing is invisible within esport. And that is what I would say is kind of the sublines we were agreeing on yesterday. And now I welcome on stage two new guests, which is Philipp Schallenberg, who is here, obviously one of my teammates, but he's here in person as somebody from Race Union, not wearing the shirt, but he will try to do the job for Race Union. Then I have Javier Guerra. He is a head manager of Gym Racing Team, which you'll find there if you want to see them. And where else? Somewhere over there. So they will have two teams in the GT500 race. And they are an international team. So I think originally, you can say that later, but I think originally you are a Spanish team. But you have pretty much team members from all over the world. And Javi is doing the marketing for Gym and is also doing that as a profession in his real life. So he will tell us something about the challenges of that. And then to my right, I have Rene Buttler. He was already on stage yesterday because he's a real expert on esports in general. And also he has a huge experience in motorsports, in sim racing himself. And he's pretty much into the business since, I don't know, 15, 20 years. I don't know how old you are, but maybe that one. And then we have Olli Pahkala. Olli is working at Fnatic, is wearing a mustache, sometimes has a fan boost. That's what we learned too. But also, he is the team manager and driver of Team Redline, which is one of the best racing teams in the sim world. And also, he founded two associations, which is the Finnish Drivers Association and the International Sim Racing Federation. And I'm pretty much hoping that we will learn something about that, because today we want to try to answer the questions of how sim racing can or should develop and what is maybe a key factor to create or to design it. And I will first come to Rene, because you were here yesterday already, and you know all the relations between the motorsport and sim racing. And maybe if you, I don't know if you first of all agree to what I summed up, or if you want to add something, but maybe you can give us some idea what you think, where is sim racing, and where should it be in 5 years, or could it be in 5 years? So, I don't know, what do you think?
I mean, it's the same as we talked about yesterday already. Sim racing could be somewhere near the top in the next 5 years in case we create an own identity for sim racing in general. Like, it's not only about being a lower part of motorsport and maybe then step up to motorsport. No, sim racing is a thing. It's a passion, it's a competition on its own. We don't really need to tie it into motorsport each and every time, because let's be honest, Olli, he's too old to become a racing driver. Same for me. So even if I would go pro again on sim racing, I can't really go to motorsport. So there's so many people that don't really aim for motorsport. They just love motorsport. They love the passion of thrilling racing. So we need to make sure that sim racing gets that own picture, own storylines, own sponsors, own teams, everything that is needed to be its own sport. Of course you can tie it in for motorsport, and of course that's a great idea, since yes, sim racing and real, I don't want to say real racing, because sim racing is real racing as well, but there's so many similarities, but still sim racing needs its own identity.
If you think of yesterday evening, I think for the finals of the Sim Racing Trophy, props to all the podium winners here, the final of the Sim Racing Trophy was a really, really cool thing. So whatever happened on track and all the commentary and broadcasting was great. The audience was here and did show immediate reaction. Like, are these live events a key for a successful esport? What is so special about these live events?
I mean, besides live events adding another layer of security for the competition, first of all, we can control everything, which is a good thing for sim racing. We all know that. But audience like that, events like that really shape a sport. Well, of course, you can watch football in TV, but it's totally different to be at the stadium and really enjoy it when you are there. With sim racing, it's a bit harder since we need to bring all the equipment, we need to bring everything in to actually make that happen. You did a great job over here at the Sim Racing Expo. It looks awesome. Audience was there. Audience was feeling everything. I was standing over there, and as soon as someone overtook, I was like, whoa, everyone was screaming. Great. But if you want to bring that to more people, like besides the ones you have over here, then we need to make sure that there's storytelling, that people know, why is this team special? What's the history of that driver? Is there maybe a rivalry between two drivers, two teams, whatever? Like, all this stuff around. Let's be honest, if you watch motorsport in TV, 90% of the time during the racing, they're not casting the racing action. They tell us about background stories, about whatever happened. So we need to build that up and find a way to get that out of the forums into the world so people know, hey, there's so much happening in this world.
I mean, honestly, if you see the event yesterday, it's a totally different concept than all of the sim racing events online. So we have very short races actually, and that's the thing what we need to change. We need to rethink about the concepts of sim racing events. So if you have shorter races with more excitement, I mean, that's the difference to Dota 2 or like CSGO. There you have all the time tension, and people who don't know it, even they watch it and they understand that it's exciting. That's what we saw yesterday. People who never saw a race, they were so excited about it. So in my opinion, we need to change also the concepts of events and also hence the story of events.
Yeah, obviously, I totally agree with you, and that's the great thing about sim racing at the moment, and what we can do, for example, with the International Sim Racing Federation, because now more or less we are imitating or copying what's happening in real life, endurance races, F1, those long races, and I think we had a chat earlier, was it yesterday, saying that the most of the tension goes out after first 30 minutes of the race. And this is why we are in a great position at the moment, because we can start defining sim racing just the way we want to. So I think that's a huge potential, and we should definitely take that approach.
So what is very good is I understand you as like two special points. So the first point was what you're pointing at, Rene, really carrying the emotions, explaining what is happening here. And I'm pretty sure we can have a perfect example when the GT500 starts, because that is going to be a longer race, and we can see if the audience is leaving after 20 minutes or if they're staying, and we will see if the commentators maybe are able to carry all that, what is like the emotion to the audience. But of course it's a different audience you're addressing to. And then the second thing is really to shape something, something special, like to create an own identity. And one other thing Rene said, to learn what is special about a team. So, Javi, what is special about your team?
Well, the special thing will be...
Yeah.
The special thing now, well, we are in collaboration with a professional racing team like Sport. So we are now seeing how it's involving sim racing also with real life. So we had the opportunity with Sport. They are like a family. They are more like a team. So yeah, we can feel like we have like a very good relation, because they are like a family. We are also like a family. So we share impressions. But the only thing is that they are racing in racing tracks, and we are racing virtual. So that's, we have very things in common, very many things, but obviously there are things that we have to switch, like real cars and virtual cars.
And when I was introducing you, I was also already explaining that you have a lot of international racing drivers in your team. And maybe you can explain a little bit about the challenge, how hard it is to connect all these drivers, like let's say from Italy, Germany, Spain, UK, Poland. I don't know what else I missed, but I mean, explain us, how does that work? Like how is communication at gym?
Yeah, well, it's hard, no, because we have to switch all together. We have to put all together. We have different cultures. We have different languages. Let's say that when we created gym, the main language was the Spanish, but now it's the English, obviously, because we have drivers like Sebastian from Germany, Dadu from Croatia. So we have, let's say, like 10 or 11, 12 nationalities. So yeah, it's quite good, because we are also improving our English, also me. So yeah, it's also good for us. So yeah, it's good, because we also, when we are in TeamSpeak, sometimes we have to create two groups, because also there are some people that they don't speak English. But yeah, sometimes we have to speak English all the time. When we are creating races, we have to also know who speaks English, who not, because they have to be in contact also during the races. But yeah, it's hard, but we are taking it in a good way.
And Olli, if you hear that, so I would say this refers pretty much to to every professional racing team that they sometimes are mixed up with several different nationalities, and they have to find a way of communication, of language, of organization, and that is only within a team. But when we're talking about sim racing as an esport and how to develop it, so how can we carry these challenges like on a higher level across all teams?
Yeah, it's a difficult challenge because sim racers come across the globe. And the way I see it, the difficulty in this is not the language in the end. Everyone more or less know some good English, and we clearly can communicate. That's not a problem. But the problem is how to use the English, and what kind of culture is behind, between Finnish driver or Spanish driver, for example. So people speak differently or have a different humor. And if they, for example, I'm a semi-sarcastic person, and if I throw jokes to Rene here, he might not understand. So that's really difficult even in team level. But once you know the people, then it starts to be okay. And when we go to start discussing between the teams, between the associations, and you start discussing globally with sim racers, that's going to be difficult because people need to keep all the time in mind that every single person in sim racing loves the sport and wants to develop it. I haven't met any sim racer who doesn't want to grow the sports. So that it's really difficult, to remind people that hey, we're not on the same page maybe, but all of us is aiming for the same goal and doing everything for the same purpose. So that will be a bit of a challenge, and I hope we can improve that at some point.
And you picked up this idea of transfer this information to all teams to make them understand that actually everybody is sitting in the same boat. And in Finland already you were founding the Finnish Drivers Association. How long ago? Like 3 years ago?
3 years ago.
3 years ago. And last year, happening somewhere around the Sim Expo, I know that, you founded the International Sim Racing Association. And maybe you can tell us what was the idea behind the Finnish Sim Racing Association? Why did you step up on the global level? And maybe what is different and how does it work?
So actually the idea behind starting to do this association and federation work was after 2013 was my debut season in iRacing World Champ, and the season ended and I felt great. The competition was so awesome, but I felt like after the competition, what is there? There is absolutely nothing, and the champ what I did was it was iRacing World Champ. It wasn't the World Championship where everyone attends to, So I felt like there's a massive gap, and there's no legal entity or nothing like FIA or nobody runs it. So I felt like we need to start doing something. I decided that let's. So the first initial idea was let's do a Finnish championship and how it goes. So we ran into a problem when organizing it. So who can say this is a Finnish championship? What is the legal entity? Community can't, well, everyone can say it, but who has the proper leverage to say, is this the Finnish championship? And so that we ended up founding the association, meaning we are a legal entity. We are supported by the Finnish Esports Federation, so we built up a legitimacy before we started pushing the sport. And then we started from there, and we went online, then we went on-site finals, and this year, a month ago, we grew up little by little. And all of that was because we built up the legitimacy and did the groundwork efficiently. And at the same time, when we built up the Finnish association, my idea was all along to see how it works, and if it works, we bring it to the international level. So now is the time status for the federation is at the moment. So we founded or did the initiative a year ago here in the Expo, and at the moment, 3 weeks ago, we put up our registration papers into the German bureau, and we're waiting for the response. So it should be within next couple of weeks, we are official, and we start doing the groundbreaking work and creating the legitimacy in global level. So that's the status, and I want to say one thing. The most important thing in here is to get a legit entity behind it. And not only that, we did it together with the community, and that's extremely important. And what is the great thing about associations and federations is that all the people who are involved in it can decide everything. So everyone is involved, and whoever backs association or federation, they are members and they can vote and all that stuff. So in the end, community always decide what is the best for the sport, and that's, you know, the biggest thing what I really want to be. So all of us sim racers drive the sport where we see it's the best.
Rene, when you hear that, does it sound familiar to you? Like a central association trying to unify what is maybe the common interests of teams, of players, or in our case, drivers. I mean, it also can connect to all the actors item of first slide. So does it sound familiar? And maybe if yes or if no, how is it organized in other events?
I mean, we got similar things in esports in general already. We know that we got VESA, which is handling the Counter-Strike team, some other games already. There is an NA organization doing the same. So basically, they organize teams and make sure that organizers actually sticking to specific, not really rules, but it's about schedules for players, that they don't play too much, that prize money gets paid out the way it should be. They got a voice in some of the decisions around the developers as well. So if they want to change something on esports mode, they talk to them, figure out like what do the players want, what do they think is the best for competitive side. So it is something that exists in esports, and it makes sense at one point. It's just our way there will be way longer. Since we're starting now, I really like the idea to do it. So I'm not against that. It's just when you consider how big esports and Counter-Strike was, and when they actually had this association, that was way later. Like, we had big events already, we had stadium events, all of that, and then people were like, oh wait, we also need to make sure that we got the rights of the players, of sponsors organized, make sure that everyone involved gets a share and it works how it should be. And with sim racing, we now start a bit earlier, so that might be at one point a bit of a struggle, but at least it gives us like a way to walk along. We just need to figure out how to do it properly. As for example, back then when you guys asked me like if I want to be involved in all that, and back then the first idea was that people would sign something and you have to stick to specific rules, but you can't really do that if you don't know yet which like companies coming around saying, oh, we want to do racing esports, and like we want to do it like this. That's what we want to do. And you're like, nah, that's against the association. Can't really do that. That's why that might become a problem in the early days of sim racing, but it will definitely help us to walk that way and to find a proper target for everyone to work on sim racing and racing in general becoming bigger.
I think I'm sorry to interrupt you, Manuel and Rene, but I want to add something to that. So now we see many companies going to sim racing, and what I experienced with Race Union, for example, is that this company, for example, needs a real professional sim racer, also somehow with business interest and experience and something like this, describing how the market works and actually having the trust from the sim racers. So this is the thing, what you said with associations. You need to have them inside them, but also with companies going into sim racing like Porsche or something else. They need sim racers in their company, pushing and helping them to establish their something structures, which may not be similar to FIA or DMSB, but totally, specialized on sim racing itself. And that's the reason why we now can actually do this panel, yeah? That's the reason. The panel, we're thinking about market concepts or like event concepts, how to shape sim racing. So that's the thing why we now actually are standing here.
I mean, at least to find all the connecting points. And there's another interesting point you said, Rene, when you said to really describe the emotions and to explain it. And then you said, Olli, we don't have, like, for example, the World Cup. And we don't even have it in the esports. Then it's the international or the whatever game, World League or World Finals.
We have one. We had a World. No, we even had a World Cup in sim racing.
We just what?
Yeah, we had a World Cup in sim racing.
Yeah, but that is
10
like
years
on-
ago.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
And which
I'm not
platform was
joking.
it?
I'm not, the Finnish racers have been amazing on that one.
Which platform was it?
Platform. Oh, it was Live for Speed back then, since that was the only like online play, like, casual online played racing game which became big. But they had a World Cup. They had different teams. They had Germany, Finland. I know that Sweden was very strong. The UK had their own team. So they grabbed them from forums. People could sign up, and then they were watching how they race in different leagues. And then they actually created a World Cup. It worked.
But like maybe you can explain that. The players, they were like grabbing from the forums or casting them. Did they have to learn, for example, to race on Live for Speed? So did they change the platform to participate at the World Cup?
I mean, there's probably someone that changed platform to do so, but most of them, of course, came from the game already. You won't race at the highest level with just saying 1 week prior to World Cup, oh, I'm changing games. No problem, I will do that. So most of them have been Live for Speed racers, but we have to keep in mind that back in the days, there have not been as many racing games available on this like sim level as we have right now. We live in the best time. We got so many games to choose from. We never had that in the past. It was always like, I'm looking for a sim racing game. So there's this game that's 6 years old, and there might be one in the next 2 years, but that's it. And nowadays, we got so many racing titles available. So I guess it will be a bit harder now, since we would actually need to figure out how to do that on different games and how to combine all of that in a World Cup. But it showed that there's an interest for that. It was even broadcasted back then. And I think we should go that way at one point. It just becomes harder with even more games, but it becomes more exciting for people to watch as well.
And then why I wanted to talk about this in depth is, Javi, I mean, from a marketing perspective, I think it is pretty much easy if you have something to report on. So you are already introducing the cooperation you have with the Zorg Rennstein, with the Zorg team back there. That is something which you can carry to an interested audience. That is something where you can, like, I don't know, show like what are the benefits or like what makes sim racing good. And then if we're talking about names and maybe brands, like it's the Peak Anti-Freeze series or something, I don't want to do advertisement here, but I mean, what do you think from a marketing perspective? How important are names? How important it is to have these concepts to export emotions?
Yeah, well, as Rene said before, it's now really good that we can choose the simulator, we can choose the game, we can, we have lots of simulators on the table to choose, but it's also nice to see that they are organizing also presential competitions. So we have also now the Formula 1 and eSport. Maybe at the end of the year we have the Vegas race. So let's say that years ago we didn't have this chance to choose because we just had maybe 1 or 2 opportunities, but now we have like 3 months. In 3 months we maybe have like 6 or 7 competitions. So, for marketing, I just said, and also because we are Gym Racing team is racing in many platforms, many simulators, so we can afford all these competitions. So it's also, it's very hard because we need also different players, because we cannot put also PS4 players to PC or switch them. Maybe they could, but they have to be really good drivers. It's very hard to just jump from the PC to PS4 and be, very fast.
And I mean, obviously that is something which is hardly understandable to an interested audience, for example, and during broadcasting. So maybe you can go a bit deeper into the organization of your team. So if you talk about marketing, like if I see a nice tweet. So yesterday, for example, you were showing this like really beautiful simulator you have there. You were showing it on Twitter. You had like a little like pictures and video, and you were kind of revealing this simulation rig, which you will have for the GT500. And then, what is behind that? Are you doing this alone in person, or like all the pictures, the text, the account data for the Twitter account? Is it shared in your team? Like, what is behind, like, let's say one tweet or maybe a report?
Well, behind Jim, there are a lot of people. Let's say in the staff department, I've got a lot of people helping me with all the stuff. If I need something that I'm not, I can do it because maybe I don't have a good PC. Guillem is there, or Agustin, or Danny. So they are always helping me 24 hours per day. So this is really helpful, and also, as you said, we have here a very good cockpit to compete the GT500. And yeah, we were not allowed to announce it until yesterday or today, so we obviously had the hype in our bodies since 2 months ago. But yeah, obviously, I'm also studying graphic design, so I always want to make designs. I always, when I put something on Twitter or on social networks, I try to do myself. If Guillem is doing the tweet, I also said, okay, you have to put the tweet, but also include that picture or something that people you see in the picture can know where it is. So if you see that simulator and you see the background, you see that we are competing in the Simracing Expo and the GT500. So it's also good. So if you have put words or use sentences, people you see that, okay, keep going. So it's not good. If we include a picture, we can also use that picture in many different social networks.
And now we heard like how's the team working, but if you put it on the ISRF level, like which work is happening in the background? How many, like maybe you can say in a rough number, like how many persons are behind that? How do you distribute work? What are the work packages you're working on? Can you kind of structure all this?
Yeah. Basically, what our plan is to establish bureau. So basically, I think it's circulated the south. To put a bit lower, please. So obviously, as an association structure, we need a board to make all the calls, and the board is responsible for the decisions and actions what the federation does. So that's the first thing what we need. And the second thing what we are planning to do, so we wanna engage all teams, all drivers, all communities, all associations to get there at first into the same channel, so we can start sharing the experience, we can start sharing knowledge, and we can start discussion and bringing up those things what needs development. And you know, we have an association in Finland who has done live events, and Rene has done a lot of, you know, business side of really high-end events and the competition, you know, so we can start developing all those details and learn from each other. I think that's one of the biggest things what we're gonna do. And in addition to that, we are planning to recruit voluntary managers to take care. So we obviously need to do marketing. We obviously need to start defining the competition, defining some good practices, good sport conducts, disciplines, all that stuff. We need to start doing planning competition structure. We need to, what I really am keen to at first is to build a website platform where all the communities and leagues, whoever run it, can share the results, can inform what they're doing. You know, you can register as a driver and you can participate in the competition, whatever platform or game or simulator it is. You can start building up your story under the federation. So that's one of the biggest things as well what I want to do, and obviously all of those things requires a lot of manpower behind it. And about the statistics, we have now 473 teams, communities, leagues and associations already did the initiative support registration. So I mean that's 2,000 drivers plus before we even made any actions other than we create the statues and doing the bureau behind it. Yeah. So we can always define how it will pan out, but that's the initial plan. So have the legitimacy, have the voluntary who can, you know, focus on the certain things what we need to improve, and then engage everybody to improve and share the experience.
This is like pretty much helping to manage this bottom-up development progress, kind of. I mean, you have the interests of the teams, of the drivers, like unified, you have the communication, and you can maybe point on the important like factors which you then have maybe to communicate. You can work with that maybe from a marketing side. But if we then come to one of the important actors, somebody who's like interested in organizing, Philipp, would an organization like the ISRF, as described now, would that be a help for organizer?
That's actually the big question, and I'm pretty unsure about it. So, for example, Race Union, they could be an organizer. I'm the opinion of that big sponsors like Race Union or other brands, that they establish series, and the ISRF is actually, giving or certifying if those series are able to be top series. And this is actually a very tricky question. So I don't know, Olli, what do you think about it? Could ISRF be something like an organizer?
You know, my perspective is we need a structure, and we need, so what I'm saying is that we have plenty of organizers, we have plenty of communities, associations. Everyone knows a lot and everyone is doing a lot for sim racing already. I would say the federation should sanction and use the existing resources, so create a structure to everything and sanction and use the existing power together, so we can really boom the legitimacy and build up the structure between and connect every points, like the Finnish organizers and the Spanish organizers and German organizers. I think that should be the biggest thing, and then together brand or stamp a ISRF logo into every series, and then everyone knows that this is a legit competition, and then we can sanction World Cup finals in Sim Expo and, you know, stuff like that. So we can really collaborate and connect each other. That, I think, is the way to go, rather than, again, make another organization which does their own thing for the events. I don't think we need, at the moment, more of that side.
I mean, what I just see in Germany, for example, is that we have like so many large communities, firstly across different platforms, and then secondly within platforms. And that's actually where we somehow not should get over with, because that's a very, very tricky task, a hard task, and also a hurting task against communities. But I think it's very necessary to think about it, and also to give, for example, national interest sponsors like Porsche, for example, something like an overview, a market, an overview about the German market, for example. In Finland, it's much more easy because you actually have an association with all simulations within this association. So it's for people so much easier to see what sim racing is about.
Maybe Rene, like I pretty much see the development also about connecting all these things, and that's good. I'm not the expert on it, but when I watch or try to understand League of Legends and Dota, it seems to me like kind of a similar concept behind. I don't know if I'm right or wrong there. How do they connect these different platforms, or are they standalone? So do we really have to connect what is like running on project cars and iRacing? Is that a must? Because I'm not so sure about that.
To be honest, I'm sure about that on racing side. It doesn't happen on other esports, since like you said League of Legends. That's entirely run by Riot. Everything that has to do with League of Legends, at least LCS, all the big stuff, is run by the publisher and by the developer themselves. They're not having anyone else in there. Sometimes they have other companies helping them, of course, to create an event, but they decide how it should look like. That's all on them. But racing is completely different, because we all share an interest in racing, and the platform is just part of like how to express that. We don't choose a game because, or a simulation because that's what we want to play. In the rest of esports is you either play Overwatch, which is a fast-paced FPS game, or you go more on the tactics side and play Rainbow Six. We don't have that difference really in racing, besides obviously classes. Like of course you can race different classes, disciplines, but we don't really need to separate game by game by game, especially since we're not that big yet. If we would do that, if we would separate everything, then we're getting to a scattered landscape once again with only like 5 viewers here, 5 viewers there, 5 viewers. Let's be honest, if I'm like, okay, I would say I only race project cars and there is an iRacing competition, I can still watch it. I can still enjoy it because it's racing. For me as a viewer, it doesn't matter on which game it is. I can still appreciate how good the guys are, how good the racing looks like. There's no difference in that. So the racing landscape is completely different on that side compared to every other esports. So if you want to connect all that, an association is a good way to do so. And yes, we got enough organizers. We know that there's enough manpower in sim racing. We just need to focus it rather than just spreading it everywhere, having a championship on every single corner, as that wouldn't really work. But you can't compare that to currently the big top 3 in esports, and projects entirely run by just one company behind it, saying this is how we want to do it, and we build a business. Because LCS and all that, that's a proper business model. Everyone is getting money, everyone is making a lot of money, and that's their world. That's why Riot is controlling all of that. But we're not there with racing yet. I mean, we can't just create a championship and say, oh, Jim will get away home like after a year with $1 million, and Redline get $1 million, and everyone else gets $1 million. You get one, you know that. Won't work yet. So racing needs to be approached slightly different than classic esports.
Yeah, Olli, you definitely need a visa, right? So, and you have to talk to them. So 1 million is not enough. And you have to work on the fan boost mod. Javi, from a marketing perspective now, if you you described that you have already players or gamers, drivers, however you call them in your team, which are going on different platforms. How do you communicate that already as Jim? Is that different, or do you put it on the same level? What are you doing?
Yeah, well, that's a hard question. We have lots of drivers switching also simulators. So we have also drivers coming from project cars, also drivers that just made a Formula 1 event like Sebastian and Patrick or Miguel Ballester. It depends also the driver, how fast he is in the simulator, or the feelings, no, or how he is driving. Obviously, it's hard. It's hard because you are switching also the perspective of the simulator. They are not all the same, because obviously they have different feelings, different cars. Maybe you have to use a different software, let's say this, different wheels or pedals also, because they are not compatible, no, with PC or PS4, or maybe Xbox or whatever you're using to do sim racing. But yeah, as you said before, obviously we have sometimes to switch drivers. We have to put some drivers in some competitions. We have to evaluate them. Maybe they are faster, maybe they are slower. So maybe sometimes a driver coming from Project Cars to iRacing, he's not fast enough. Or maybe if he tries R Factor, he's really fast. So it also depends, the driver, the feelings, the car. It's always, practice, 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 and see where he can fit better.
And maybe, we have Team Rennsport Online and Team Redline there, and you have drivers running on different platforms too. So what Javi describes, is that familiar to you guys? So how do you make a difference when you're communicating? So do you say this is the iRacing World Championship Series, and that is where everything is watching at because that's a competition and that is the big shot? Or do you just say look, there is the driver X and he's driving in the World Championship, without explaining that there's iRacing and stuff? Because when we are trying to carry emotions and explaining things to people, I imagine it is hard to understand that there's 4, 5, 6, I don't know, different platforms or games.
Yeah, it's how we communicated it is we don't really start pushing out the platforms or the games what we are using. The important thing for Redline is when we go for a competition, it's a proper competition, and we appreciate much the competition. It doesn't really matter which platform it is, and as I can say it for myself, it's of course it's always difficult to go from one platform to another. It always requires some time to get used to it, but in the end the racing is all the same, always the same, and the challenges what you face, it's always the same. It's just a matter of a bit difference between platforms, and we definitely, we are not in the deals with any games for sure, as you can see that. So maybe with R Factor too, but yeah, it would not be consistent to start saying that iRacing World Championship, putting the notice into the platform, because it doesn't make sense. What really does make sense for us is where the competition and what the competition is. That's extremely important for us.
I mean, honestly, just imagine there would only exist Formula One 2017 from Codemasters. No sim racing or like simulations. So that's actually, that would be similar to FIFA, to Dota, to Counter-Strike. You know, then it would be a huge crowd and you have everything pretty focused. And here it's the thing, if you have different platforms in a team, with iRacing, iExperience on Facebook, for example, you have a much more connected community. On Assetto Corsa, on the other side, you have a much more, user base. But this user base is actually only focused on the Facebook page from Assetto Corsa, not on the Facebook page of more or less, Team Redline or Rennsport Online or something else. And that's the thing, for example, I experience often that then the priority is, of course, firstly there where the larger community is, where you get more likes and recognition.
Let me just jump into that, sorry. The problem with that is that we sometimes misjudge a platform for whatever due to how it looks like. Assetto Corsa sold around, what is that, 500,000? You can't really compare that to, I don't know, 2.4 million for Project Cars 1, for example. Even if it might look different on Facebook or whatever, the community is not always as big as it looks like, and sometimes we need to, I like the Redline approach. I know since they were racing in our last SMSR championship, that they try to do that without the platform, just, hey, it's racing, 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 because sometimes we even need to separate competition, like sim racing, esports and competition, from just normal sim racing, because we never know if one of the guys has feedback turned off on his wheel just because it's faster. We can't really say every time like a competition is about being as realistic as possible, because I know some racer that turned force feedback off, and in real life I could not go to my car and say, oh yeah, we're running on the same laws in like physics, but I will just turn off every feedback on my wheel.
To not turn off any feedback to this discussion, because we won't delay the GT500 start, let me 10 seconds sum up what we found out, or what we should continue to discuss about. So that is carrying emotions. That is what I get. Carrying emotions, explaining what is our sport and what is behind, like which structures. And then also to really work together to form teams and organizers to one strategic organization, which can also be a connector to event organizers or other actors we have on the first slide. So hopefully that very short finish is not a finish of the discussion. I know we can meet and we can continue to do that in front of the stage, and we would love to have it. Thank you guys. Thank everybody for your interest, and hopefully we can start really thinking of how we can shape the discussion.